What's up, pet people? My name is Lexi and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, we're going to be doing a quick little how to care for ball pythons type guide thing. I've done previous how to care for guides. If you're interested in seeing those, please make sure to subscribe and go check out my other videos. But today is going to be all about ball pythons. And of course, I'm going to have Monty in the video since she is my ball python. And yeah, I'm just super excited for this and I hope you guys keep watching. Right into today's video, first thing I want to cover is ball python enclosures. Now, ball pythons do vary in size from around 3 to 6 feet, obviously depending on age and sex of the ball python. The male pythons will be smaller, as it is with most reptiles, and the females will be larger. Most times, females can top out around 5.5 to 6 feet. Other times, like with my ball python, they can have stunted growth if they're not cared for properly. Which I'm going to do a video about her and how I rescued and rehabilitated her and why she's smaller than she should be for her age. But as I was saying, ball pythons can vary on size between, age and sex, so you need to take that into account. Ball pythons, juveniles will do fine in a 15 to 20 gallon tank. Of course, this is when they are babies and very small. Now, most websites will say that ball pythons full growns are okay in a 30 to 40 gallon tank, and I don't like this personally. Of course, 30 gallons can be around 3 feet long, but it needs to be long as well as deep. Now, because my ball python is stunted in growth, I have her in a 3 foot long by 2 feet deep by 18 inches high vision cage, which I will include a picture of and then I'll show her in later. But for your ball python, they need to be able to stretch out at least a side and a half of a side, which Monty's able to do in her enclosure. So for this, you need to make sure that they can, go out one, probably the length of the cage, and then go down half the width of the cage, and they can fit there. You also need to make sure that whenever thinking of your enclosure, you think about the hides. Ball pythons need 2 hides in their enclosure, as do most snakes. I currently have one in Monty's enclosure, and I do have a little more humid because we're still working on being able to get her sheds off. She had a perfect shed last time she shed, which was 2 weeks ago, so I'm thinking about going ahead and adding that second hide, but it does have a thermal gradient in the hide itself. I got an extra large hide in there, and basically I have the heat mat placed long ways so it covers half of it, and then the other half of the hide can be cooler and she can curl up on whichever half is easier for her. And she is small enough to where it works for her and it's all good in that aspect. But anyway, as I was saying, most places say adults are good in 30 to 40 gallons. In my opinion, if they're stunted, the 3 feet by 2 feet deep works. Or I would recommend at least a 4 feet long by 2 feet deep enclosure for full-grown ball pythons. That's just, what I think would work best and is most comfortable. And of course, they can stretch out either, one side and half of a side or a little more than that. Anyway, as I was saying, the enclosure itself needs to be large enough to where they can do that. Juveniles are fine, again, in a 15 to 20 gallon. Adults, I recommend a 3 feet long by 2 feet at the minimum. If they're not stunted, if they're stunted, that would work perfectly for them. And ball pythons are ball pythons. They do ball up and they're not overly active. They kind of sit in their hides and they like to, be in little balls. So bigger is better in most cases, but you can fit them in the little bit of a smaller enclosure as long as it works to where they can spread out like they need to. Moving on from the whole how you should size your enclosure thing, we're going to go on with what needs to be in the enclosure. So as I said, you need to have 2 hides to provide that thermal gradient for your ball python, 1 hide on the cool side, 1 hide on the warm side, and of course a water dish. She does have a large water dish. If you're in the more dry climate area, I recommend having a larger water dish just so whenever the tank, the warm air temperature can help that water kind of evaporate and cause a bit of a higher humidity in the tank. That way you don't have to mist it as much. I also note that Monty does kind of like slithering through it. She's not able to curl up completely in it, and I don't recommend having one to where they can curl up completely in it just in case of drowning with smaller snakes, but I do recommend having a rather large water dish just so it can help with the air humidity. So another great thing to remember is snakes like enrichment, so throw some logs or fake plants or real plants if you have a bioactive. Those type of things are really great to have in an enclosure. And with ball pythons, like I said, they don't really do a whole lot during the day. They just kind of ball up and sit in their hides because they are nocturnal and you won't really see them during the daytime. But it is nice to have extra enrichment in there for whenever they are out and about in their enclosure. As I said with the water dish, it is good to remember that they need fresh and clean water at all times. This is with all reptiles, not just ball pythons. Please do not leave your water in the enclosure for like a week at a time and allow it to where it can get like, not mold, what's this, mossy and gross in their water. Please, algae, that's the word I was looking for. But please don't do that. Please make sure that you give them fresh water every day, or you check their water every day, or you top off their water every day. Just make sure you're giving them clean water at all times, because you wouldn't like drinking dirty, 3-day-old water. Please don't make your reptile do that. So we talked about size of enclosure and some things to go into the enclosure as far as decor and enrichment. Now we're going to talk about the substrate. I do have a video over types of substrates that I prefer in my enclosures. Of course, it's what you prefer, but one thing that you need to remember is never ever ever use cedar, especially with reptiles. Never ever use cedar, and to not use sand, especially with ball pythons, because they do have heat pits and it can get in their heat pits and cause issues for them. And that's also why I do not recommend Eco Earth, the loose coconut fiber substrate, because it can get in their heat pits and it just causes a whole lot of problems. So what I do recommend for ball pythons and what I use with my girl Monty is a forest floor cypress bedding mulch. This is great for retaining humidity and helping the humidity stay up. If you live in a more humid climate and don't want the humidity to get too high, you can use aspen shavings, but I live in a very dry climate, so I need something to kind of help hold that humidity and bump it up a little bit, so of course I use the cypress mulch. Basically what I do is I mist it down once a week or so and rotate it to where it doesn't just sit there and get all gross and mildewy. Obviously I'll mist it, rotate it, mist it again, and get it to just kind of like give that little extra oomph to the humidity and make sure it stays where it needs to. But it also makes it look more like their natural environment, That's why I choose the cypress mulch. But definitely do not use cedar, do not use pine, and do not use sand with any reptile, I think, and especially not ball pythons. They're so fragile little creatures. They're very fragile. So basically what I recommend is aspen shavings or cypress mulch. And like I said, I have a whole video on that, which I'm going to link right here. So going from the bedding, as I said, I live in a drier climate and I need something to kind of bump up that humidity. And that is because ball pythons do require a between 50 and 60% constant humidity in order to be able to shed and to function. Ball pythons with low humidity, they can get retained sheds, retained eye caps. It's just a really bad scenario. And between 50 and 60, I keep mine at 52. And the lowest I think I've ever had it drop with the Custom Cages Vision Enclosure, because they are amazing at retaining humidity. The lowest I think it's gotten is like 49. And then of course I misted it and it was fine. Like I said, they're amazing at retaining humidity. I love it, and they have a little vent in the back. Oh, I love my cage. Anyway, 50 to 60% humidity, and of course baby ball pythons, because they are learning how to shed and function as snakes, they need a bit of a higher humidity. I recommend between 60 to 70%, but not 70 at all times, so like 60 to 65, just so that they don't have too high of a humidity and get an RI, or too low of a humidity and are not able to shed. Another great way to make sure that you can maintain humidity, as I mentioned earlier, is having a rather large water dish where the heat in the enclosure can kind of help that evaporate and just keep that humidity up to where it needs to be. Another thing you can do to help with humidity or shedding in your reptile is creating a little bit of a humid hide and just kind of spraying down inside of the hide more than you do the rest of the enclosure, and that kind of bumps up the humidity where they can stay. Of course, once you have proper control of your reptile shedding, or if they have no problems, I would keep one hide a little bit more humid than the other and let them choose where to go. Or you could do a humid box if you're also having issues shedding, but I will do a whole nother video on how to help with shedding later on. Okay guys, so moving on from humidity, we're going to get right into temperature. Ball pythons, like most more humid environment reptiles, need a bit of a higher temperature. During the nighttime, of course, it can drop a little bit lower as it is with most species, but the ambient air temperature at most times for ball pythons needs to be between 76 to 80 degrees. And their basking spot needs to be between 86 to 90 degrees, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, you can have it vary a little bit, but do not go over 90 degrees. That can be detrimental to your snake. Now, the way that you get the heat into the enclosure, people do a lot of different things with those. People who use tubs for breeding obviously have the heat tape. People who have them in glass enclosures may either do a mat or a ceramic heat emitter, but as with all heating units, I recommend having a thermostat to regulate that temperature. I personally use heat mats and feel like all non-arboreal snakes do better with heat mats, so that's just what I prefer and what I use. It's personally up to you, but as long as you have a thermostat on there to regulate the temperature and make sure it doesn't get too hot for your reptile, it should be fine, theoretically. Some heating units that you need to stay away from 100% are heat rocks. Please do not use heat rocks. Your snake can get burned severely from it. Not even sure why heat rocks are a thing. They shouldn't be a thing for any reptile, but unfortunately they are. So I would stay away from heat rocks, and I forgot the exact name, but like the deep heat emitters, I would not use those for ball pythons either. As I said, create a heat gradient so you have one side that's warmer and one side that's cooler, either within under the tank mat or with a heat emitter of some type. Again, they don't need UVB, so I wouldn't really use a heat bulb. I would just have a UVB bulb and then a heating unit of some other kind. UVB is the supplemental, you know, since they don't need it, but do not use heat rocks under any circumstances, please. Okay, so the last topic that we're going to cover is feeding. Most ball pythons are known for being picky eaters and not really taking to their food right away. I'm not going to go into how to get your ball python to eat. I'm just going to kind of quickly cover what they should eat or how often they should eat. So for adult ball pythons, you need to feed them about every 10 to 14 days, and younger ball pythons, juveniles, 7 to 10 days, and smaller than that, not quite every day, maybe every other day whenever you first get them. It just depends on the size. Of course, there are different charts that you can find online to figure out how often exactly to feed your ball python. Now, something to remember is I always feed, and I always recommend everyone else to feed frozen mice, not live, because live mice can fight back and hurt your reptile. Never, ever, ever leave live food in the enclosure unsupervised for more than 10 minutes. I obviously wouldn't even do more than 5 if it were me, but some snakes only like to eat live. As I said, I get all my frozen mice from Lane's Lab. I've said it in multiple videos. Lane Labs, not Lane's Lab, Lane Labs, and I will link that in the description box down below. But ball pythons, or any reptile that, you know, require mice, definitely feed frozen and not live. Now, moving on from like what to feed them, obviously they eat mice and rats. We're gonna quickly touch base on how big it should be, how big the mouse or rat should be, and that with every snake is pretty much the same as every snake. You need to feed it, I'm gonna insert a diagram real quick, you need to feed it the size of the largest part of its body. So basically, if you turn the mouse or rat sideways, it needs to be the size of, or not diameter, But the like width of your snake, doing too little can cause starvation, doing too much can cause obesity, and sometimes they might not be able to get the critter, I don't know what I was trying to say with that. They might not be able to get it down, and they could risk hurting themselves by trying to eat too large a prey. Most times they will not, though. That's what I meant to say. But yeah, so feeding ball pythons is kind of tricky sometimes. Like I said, we'll be making another video on tips and tricks to helping your snake eat. Wow, I don't know why I can't talk all of a sudden. Must be signed to end the video here soon. But I will be doing another video on that completely. This is just kind of what they need to eat and how often they need to eat type of thing. So, okay guys, so as promised, here's Monty. Thank you guys for watching today's video. I hope you kind of learned something about ball pythons and their care, and that it was just fun and educational for you guys. As always, hit that like button if you liked today's video, and if not, you watched it all the way through if you're at this point, so obviously just go ahead and hit that like button anyway. If you're interested in seeing Monty again, or some of my other reptile babies, or even my fur babies, please hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for future videos. I have quite a few planned, and one in particular about her that I think everyone would like to see, or that you would just enjoy. So yeah, as I said, please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video. Say bye, Monty. She doesn't really do a whole lot, but yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.